Good evening. You're listening to the new WCEG network on WCEGtalkradio.com, or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG network. I'm Celeste Giordano, along with my co-host Sara with the Global Legacy and Wealth Building for the next 2 hours. We're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG network. And last but not least, the topics and opinions are those of the show host and guest and not WCEG network. Thank you for your continued support. And thank you, Penny Rodgers with WCEG network for this amazing platform. Hi, Sara, how are you?
I'm great. Les, how's it going?
It's going great. I am excited for our show tonight. We have a fabulous lineup. We have Bob Rodgers, who is the president and CEO of Street Grace, and we have Camila. How about that? I said that right. Camila Zolfaghari, the executive director, in the first hour from 5 to 6. And I'm very excited to have both of them as our guest here tonight, Sara. You and I have known both of these people for a long time, and we've done some amazing work and supported them in lobby days and had them as guest speakers at our networking events. And I'm very excited to hear what's going on in 2020 with Street Grace. And I'd like to share a little bit about Bob Rodgers, the president and CEO. And Bob serves as Street Grace president and CEO. He bringing in more than 30 years of corporate and nonprofit leadership and team development experience to this role. Under Rodgers' leadership, Street Grace has experienced remarkable growth and has significant presence, including offices in Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and California. Hey, Bob, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Celeste?
We are doing fabulous. We appreciate you being with us tonight. I know there's a little bit of a storm there in Atlanta, but we've got a lot of information to share.
Yeah,
and what I'd like to do is, would you introduce Camila?
Yeah, I will. In fact, I will tell you that we've gotten off on the wrong foot because you spent too much time on me and you should have spent more on Camila. So I'd be thrilled to share a little bit of her background. I won't do all of it justice, but I'll hit the high points that certainly matter with relativity to our conversation tonight. Camila has been with Street Grace for, I guess, are we going on 3 years or something like, yeah, time flies when you're having fun. Prior to that, she was for 4 years, was the human trafficking prosecutor for Fulton County here in Metro Atlanta. And then after that, was the chief human trafficking prosecutor for the state of Georgia under 2 attorney generals. And so was in that role, I think, for between 3 and 4 years. And then we were fortunate enough through a series of conversations and things like that to be able to join forces with her when she moved from the prosecution side to the prevention side. And she can share with it and explain it a lot better than I can and should. But I think it was just the bottom line is, she had spent a lot of time prosecuting and trying to deal and address the issue after the harm and after the damage was done, and wanted to take her talents and gifts and abilities and her legal background and see how we could best utilize those to have a greater impact on preventing it from ever occurring. And so we've been thrilled to have her. She started as our director of policy here in Georgia and then became the executive director for all of Georgia a little over a year ago, and is now doing that. And quite frankly, we snuck in, and she's still doing some policy work here and in Texas and Tennessee and California, and even nationally in some of the work that we're doing. So it's a gift to us to have her here.
Absolutely, Bob. I couldn't agree with you more. And Camila, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, I was just so impressed with both of the bios that both of you submitted today. And again, I didn't want to take up a lot of time talking about the bio because people know both of you very, very well in the community and the things that Street Grace is doing for our community here in the metropolitan Atlanta. And so what we look forward to tonight is learning about street grace. And Camila, would you do the honors and tell us about Street Grace as far as the website, a phone number, how people can get a hold of you, and also I believe that you have an event that's happening tomorrow that's online that I'd like for you to share right in the beginning, if you would, please.
Perfect, that'd be great. So our website is just streetgrace.org, and the best way to get us is easy, info@streetgrace.org. That gets routed to whichever one of us or person on the staff that needs it. And to answer your questions, but we do have an event tomorrow. We're doing a policy training tomorrow at 11:30. It's been moved completely virtual. With all of our trainings now, we've been able to adapt them to be done in person or virtual. So this one's going to be virtual tomorrow. And you can still, there's a few slots left, so you can sign up. And that's just, you can go to streetgrace.org and click on events, or streetgrace.org/events. It's right there on the top of the page. We're really going to talk about how to move past this advocacy. Once you understand what trafficking is, how do you make a real difference, and how do you change the laws? We'll talk about some of the big changes that have just happened in this last session, and then just some of the plans for the future and what we're working on right now. Because as we were talking about in this strange year, we just wrapped up the session, but in less than 6 months, the session begins again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, is there a cost? This is a complimentary. There's no cost to this.
This is, yes, absolutely. We're able to offer this. Obviously, we need support in order to keep doing our work, but this is a free of charge event.
Very good.
And all your events are on the website if people wanted to see further out.
Yes, we have our events. They go up on the events website. Everything's also on our social media, our Facebook and our Instagram and our Twitter. We continually are pushing stuff out, both informational and then the events that we have and we're scheduling.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that up front, because with the storm in Atlanta, in case there's any kind of technical difficulties, I wanted to make sure that people are aware of that event tomorrow that's going to be online. And I've attended an event where you taught down there at Street Grace, and it's just an amazing thing to be a part of that and to serve and give back in the community. And education is king, and knowing about what's going on in our community and being up to date in the policies, the laws, and everything else.
Yeah, you're right. I appreciate that. And it really is exciting because, sometimes when you look at the world, it can look pretty bleak, but when you look at what has changed in so many areas, trafficking is my area. Just in the last 3 years and in the last 10 years, you really realize that when people are motivated, when people care, and when people turn that caring into action, we really do see real change.
Absolutely. And you said that's tomorrow at 11?
He said 11:30. 11:30.
And how long will that be for?
It's about an hour and a half. So you can be eating your lunch, and I won't even, you don't even have to eat neatly.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. I appreciate that. Well, Sara, I'm going to start us off with the very first question that I have for Bob Rodgers is, Bob, would you be so kind to tell us, how did Street Grace get started?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. And I'll give you the short version. If you look back really at the beginning of this movement, certainly around Atlanta, probably 12 or 13 years ago, there was an awful lot of, there were some origins of a lot of different activity that were taking place. So in a 3 or 4 year time window, there were a couple of things. One, there was an FBI study where they did a study of the field offices around the US that had the highest incidence of reports of sex trafficking or child sex trafficking. They published the 14 offices and locations that had the most. Atlanta was on those. They listed them alphabetically. So Atlanta was listed first when they published the report. And from that moment forward, you heard things like Atlanta's the worst city in America and Atlanta's the worst city. There were also another thing locally. Then Mayor Shirley Franklin was being asked more and more questions about whether this was an issue in our city. And she commissioned some research and some study that was done by her office and some other folks. came back and identified that, yes, we had a real issue with this. You may recall, those of us that have been around Atlanta for a while, that she wrote a book called Dear John, launched the Dear John campaign, John being the buyer of sex, and put posters and billboards around the city and at the airport. There were announcements over the PA system at the airport. It said, if you've come to our city to harm our children, you're not welcome here. We are looking for you and we will find you. So really an early adopter of taking a fairly aggressive and forward-leaning posture on this rather than sitting back. So a lot of credit goes to her as well. There was also, here in Atlanta, a chief magistrate judge named Nina Hickson, who had written that she had just presided over her 1,000th case of a teenage girl standing in her courtroom being charged with prostitution. And there was no buyer and there were no trafficker. I think the language then may have been no John and no pimp, but there was no buyer and there was no trafficker. And this system is broken and has to get fixed. So right around that time, there are a group of churches and ministry leaders in Metro Atlanta that have started meeting and coming together, looking for ways that they could collectively impact the city for good. These are organizations, ministries, and churches that had, memberships and weekend attendance in the tens of thousands. And so as this happened, Mayor Shirley Franklin picked up the phone, called one of those pastors and said, we've got a problem. Will you take it on? And they said, we've been looking for something to take. I'm paraphrasing a lot of stuff here. But they said, we've been looking for something, and this sounds like it's something that we could wrap our hands around and start to get our people passionate about. As a result of that, in 2008, Street Grace was birthed, but it was birthed being fully funded by a group of churches here in Metro Atlanta. As a result of that, the congregates and people that heard about it wanted to get involved, wanted to get engaged, and wanted to connect with it and give. So in January of 2009, we were launched as an independent 501c3, still funded and supported by those churches. And I might add, 12 years later, every single one of them is still engaged. Most of them, if not all, at a higher level today than they ever have been. And I think that speaks to the commitment. I think it speaks to the way that it gripped their hearts. And I also think it speaks to the progress that's been made and how committed they are to seeing this through. And so that's where we were. That's what got us started. We launched by just going into churches and doing some teaching and training and community meetings. And the first several years talked to hundreds of people and then a few thousand people. And the last couple of years have presented to 75 to 85,000 people, and about 50,000 plus of them have been between the ages of 12 and 18. So really doing a lot of educating and training, and also getting the message out to that key group of folks that we're trying to get to and work on the prevention side, is the middle schoolers and high schoolers.
Very good.
So Bob, what is Street Grace mission? What is your mission?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's super simple intentionally, so that we don't get distracted and we don't get lost in all the stuff. It is to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children, period. So what makes the difference between sexual exploitation and commercial sexual exploitation is where something, and for this one, we'll just kind of borrow from the federal trafficking definition, and that is where something of value is promised or exchanged. It doesn't have to just be exchanged. It doesn't have to just be cash. It's something of value that is promised or exchanged. And I think folks oftentimes forget about the promise part. So promise can be protection, it can be friendship, it can be camaraderie, it can be food, it can be shelter, it can be clothes. It can be iPhones and technology. It can be, so many other things. There are situations where the promise or exchange of something of value was somebody, a teacher saying to a student, you have to pass my class to graduate. Right now you've got an F, and I know how you can get a B by next Thursday. So you have to think about it and just kind of let your mind, unfortunately, sit for a minute in that kind of uncomfortable space of processing the so many different faces and ways that this can be, that this can occur. And Camila, not to throw her in, but Camila has been on the other side of that and has seen the ugly side of the prosecution and the legal aspect, and can certainly speak to that as well.
Yeah.
So you have some comments on that, Camila?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. It's when you hear those stories, and you hear that child tell you, 14, 12, 16, tell you the story of what he promised her. You see the brokenness, you see the destruction. I think we often say it is why I'm at Street Grace now, because I needed to move to the prevention side of things. Whenever we talk, I always tell stories. People learn through stories, and their stories of people I know and cases I worked. Every example, every law, every part of the law we talk about, I've got a face to go with that. And face of someone that even when given all of the supportive services and all the supportive services they need and deserve, you never undo the harm that's been done. And that's why it's so important, I think, that we focus on preventing trafficking and from multiple angles before it happens. Because that's what we would want if it was our own children. People have this rescuer savior complex where they want to go rescue this hurting person. And while that comes out of a good place in your heart, if it was our child, if we truly cared about this person, we would want to make sure we stopped it before it happened. We wouldn't settle for getting a high from rescuing somebody.
Absolutely. So Camila, let me ask you something. What does demand reduction mean?
Yeah. So the trafficking world, it's all about supply and demand to the traffickers, both those selling the children and buying the children. That's all it's about. And when you can reduce demand, when you reduce those who are trying to purchase children, that's where you can make the most impact. So I prosecuted a lot of sellers, a lot of, pimp traffickers, seller traffickers, what people think of as the trafficker. And while most of them ended up with life without parole sentences, it was still always for them sort of a cost of doing business. They knew they'd spend a portion of their life in prison. But the people who were buying these children, they didn't even expect to spend a day in prison. They're just buying sex. That's all they use this like, it's the oldest profession. Well, no, farming's the oldest profession. I mean, let's get real here. And that's is never an excuse for exploiting. And so these people who are buying children, who very often, were upper middle class, at least middle class, you have to have a certain amount of expendable income in order to purchase someone. They were family people, they were business owners. When you can stop them, when they realize that in Georgia, if you purchase someone, whether you know it or not, if they are under the age of 18, no matter how willing they appeared to be, or no matter how old they said they were, you can go to prison for 25 to 50 years or life for trafficking. You really make an impact, because while these seller traffickers, the people on the supply side, very often just, it's cost of doing business to go to prison, that buyers, the demand side doesn't. And you can make a huge deterrent effect by just letting them know that these are people you really can't. There's a small percentage that just as they realize that they're participating in trafficking and exploiting are going to stop. Those we can get the heart, and the rest,
right,
we're either going to lock up or scare to protect the kids. It just makes the biggest difference. And it's part of that nonprofit law enforcement working together and everybody having their role. So I was a prosecutor in Fulton County when I got to prosecute the first buyer of trafficking for trafficking, the first buyer of children for trafficking in the state of Georgia. But the reason we started looking at that was because nonprofits, and in Georgia, particularly Street Grace, was talking about the importance of going after demand, not just arresting the guy that she was with, but doing the further investigation and arresting the people who purchased her. And that has made such a huge difference in what we're seeing. And that is how you can stop it, because unfortunately, the supply, which is vulnerable children. And when we're talking about teenagers, insecure and vulnerable, it's all, I mean, that we're talking about all children.
Right.
And so as long as we have teenagers who are insecure and vulnerable, when we have to attack this is on the demand side.
Yeah, can I say something about that? Yeah, I think for us, I want to highlight too that we don't use the word demand reduction as kind of a buzzword. There are words that go through all industries and all this kind of stuff that kind of catch on. Demand reduction for us is at the heart of what we do. So if you look at the fact that we have 3 pillars, and every program and every initiative that we have rests on at least one of those, and that's prevention and protection. I mentioned earlier that we present the last few years to about 50,000, 55,000 kids a year between the ages of 12 and 18. We view that as demand reduction because when you educate kids how to conduct themselves online, what warning signs look like, how to make reports, how to have conversations with their friends, you are helping reduce the available demand in the marketplace, because an equipped and educated child or teen is one of the most powerful things that we can have. Second thing is policy. Our second pillar is policy. And so that's a large part of what Camila was brought here and has done such a great job on. And the policy really looks, again, comprehensively, we view that as demand reduction. One, you're providing programming and resources that are available for those who have been victimized by this. So if someone has been victimized by this, they deserve the best. Georgia does and should have the highest gold standard quality of care and rehabilitation and programs and restorative care of anyone in the country. And we're doing a really good job of that. But it also involves looking at making sure laws are written in a way that allows arrests to be made in a proper way and then allows for successful prosecution. So policy is more than just who can craft a law. It's how do you craft a law that works? And we all know locally, statewide, and nationally, we're all struggling with that right now, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
And then the ability to prosecute successfully. And then for us, the third P is the pursuit. And it's the pursuit of the buyers of sex and the traffickers, and removing the cloak of anonymity that they flourish and live underneath. Okay. We've got a board member who has said for the entire 4 years that I've been here, tell me the day it's okay, and I'll take out billboards around 285 and I will put the faces and phone numbers of the people on it who have, who have attempted to or have been found guilty of purchasing sex with children. And so while we don't go that far, there's some serious power in that. When a buyer of sex has to think when they pick up the phone, there's a 1 in 3 chance I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to lose my job. The elders at my church are going to find out. The neighbors are going to find out. The kids' baseball, softball, tennis team that I coach or lead on is going to find out. My wife and family are going to find out. When that happens, there becomes this massive tipping point. And we can get some of this stuff done by education, and we can get some of it done by policy and prevention and things like that. Some of it is going to be consequences that are paid and the fear of the consequence. And while, as a Christian organization, we're not driven by fear, we acknowledge that it's a tool in the fight, and it's okay. And since it's there, we're going to use it. And so I think it's important to just unpack the fact that this demand reduction thing is more than a bumper sticker. If you strip away demand work from the work that we do at Street Grace, there's nothing left.
So I think you maybe answered the second part of my question is demand reduction. Is that different than most?
Yeah, I think it is. Rightfully so for, Camila could speak to this, but rightfully so for probably the first 10 or 12 or 15 years in this movement, not just in Georgia, but around the country, the emphasis was on restorative care. It's like Camila said earlier, our hearts are immediately turned to people who are wounded or broken or victimized, because we all that's part of what makes America great. Even today, is that we want to help, we want to extend a helping hand, and we want to bring healing, and we want to be a part of the solution. But it took us a while to recognize that there are 2 equal and important issues in eradicating the demand or stopping human trafficking and sex trafficking. And that is the restorative care piece of it that we talked about earlier. Everybody needs that. And then the demand reduction piece of it. You do not end trafficking by following it around and trying to put all the broken pieces back together.
Right.
That's not me. That doesn't in any way mean that it's less significant. It means that there are two equally important approaches that we have to do well to dismantle this system and to break it down. And fortunately, not just in Georgia, but around the country, but especially in Georgia, the last 2 to 3 years, there have been some great strides on that in all of those pillars that we were to say: prevention, protection, policy, and pursuit.
Well, and I remember hearing both of you speak on different occasions. It surprised me that a lot of the buyers were outside of 285. Is that correct?
Yeah, the inside as well, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just, that the buyers were outside of 285. And with the statistics today, does it still gravitate to outside 285?
I'm honestly not 100% sure, but here's what I am sure of. If you look at zip codes and you look at average incomes, it will follow that, because it takes. I mean, let's just be really, really candid. You got to be able to spend $100, $150, $200 per transaction, if you will. I hate to say it like that. And for the most part, it has to be undetectable, right? I mean, right. Your family, your work, your friends, they have to, so it's got to come out of it doesn't always, but usually it comes out of disposable income because this is a hidden crime and people try to do it beneath the surface. So I know some of what you were talking about was some of the data collection that was done earlier that showed that kind of V where 475 kind of go, and you look at that East Cobb Alpharetta. And I'm sure today that that's still true, but I think that wherever you plot zip codes and you look at incomes, I would imagine there would be a strong correlation, no matter what city you were in, however you broke that down. I think that system would be true.
Absolutely. Go ahead, sir.
So during this pandemic time, what are some of the changes you've seen? Like, there's not as much pollution, right? Because people aren't driving and things like that. What are some of the changes you've seen during this pandemic?
A couple of things. Camila has just finished. I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to punt some of it too. So you'll get a two-part answer. Part of the way that we measure and track this is online activity with a chatbot, some learning artificial intelligence that we have that is out there on the website right now in 17 or 18 cities and 10 or 11 different states. And it is she is a chatbot named Gracie who chats like a 14-year-old Black girl, white girl, Asian, Latino, and a boy. And so in that, for the most part, we have seen that activity stay relatively steady. Now, we are not intentionally right now, we're not in New York, we're not in LA, we're not in Chicago. I think if we were there, we would have seen some fairly dramatic downturns, but we intentionally said, hey, let's keep kind of doing what we're doing and see what we see. And so up along the East Coast from DC down to Florida, we saw, with the exception of a couple of weeks, we saw the activity on that stay fairly steady. And that is where people are going to nefarious websites. They are identifying what at least appears to be a child, and they're making the first step to contact with that person to attempt to arrange a transaction to purchase sex with a child. Which again, I don't know if this is a family-oriented show or not, but not to be crude, but to be candid, which is raping a child for money. And so when that occurs, we have chatbots that are out there that are intercepting the phone calls, collecting the data, collecting the text conversations, setting them up and establishing them in a permanent file. So the person thinks that they're actually talking to the person, exchanging text with the person on the other end of the phone. The other side of that, that has not remained steady, but is now bouncing back, is the illicit massage business. And so Camila and her team just finished about a 9-month study of the illicit massage business, specifically around Metro Atlanta and in Georgia, and have got some data to report. But that's the second highest form of sex trafficking, as is reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline in the United States of America, accounting for about 9,000 to 10,000 illicit massage spas or parlors, and about 3 to 3.5 billion in illegal revenues. And you and I know what they are. Okay. We drive past them every day when we go to work, when we go to church, and when we go to the office. I'm not talking about the legitimate businesses, like, well, I won't get into naming names, but the legitimate businesses that might occasionally have a report or you might hear something about. We're talking about the places that you drive past with neon signs and tinted windows that are open till 10 at night or 11 at night or midnight or 24 hours a day. And you know it when you see it, but you just drive right past it because it doesn't affect you and it doesn't have anything to do with what your day-to-day life is. I've talked longer about that than I meant to, but Camila's just released some fairly comprehensive research on that is getting local and national attention, if you want to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's been a really great study we could do. Just before you can really solve a problem, you have to understand the scope of it. And everything we do at Street Grace, we try to be very research-based. So we were able to work with using, we have IRB certified, peer-reviewed methodology, and found that in Georgia, the illicit massage businesses are very conservatively at least $42 million business.
Wow.
Concentrated primarily here in Metro Atlanta. And the other thing we really know about them is very often they are part of organized crime, that the same people own multiple illicit massage businesses in Georgia. They'll own them in multiple states. And it's why there's some areas of our state that have really focused on cracking down on this. Johns Creek, Fayette County, different areas. But when you talk to their law enforcement, the biggest frustration is they can shut them down and they move right across the city border, right across. And it's the same people that own so many of them. And so it's so important on the policy side, which is where I seem to always go back to these days, that we can make some really important big changes. So we did, half of the research on the scope, and the other half of the research is really focused on what do we do about this? How can we together with law enforcement, with code enforcement, by enabling the community, by enabling landlords, solve this problem, working with, labor boards, working with OSHA. How can we eliminate this really large, really multinational form of crime? So we've had great talks, really excited, just both local and state policy and then community involvement to make some changes so we can shut down this form of trafficking that fuels so much of the demand that we see.
Yeah, that's just spot on. Another just quick point, just to give a context to it, is, again, Camila was right. That was very conservative research. Every place that there was a rounding, we rounded down, and sometimes we rounded down by 20% because we didn't want to exaggerate a difficult enough program. But even at that, it tells us that 1,100 to 1,300, almost exclusively men, are walking into these illicit massage parlors every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in Metro Atlanta and around Georgia, to purchase some sort of illegal sex, whether it's a full sex act or whether it is components and stages of that. It's happening to that degree. And so think about that next time you go up to your grocery store or the department store, and 2 doors down the sidewalk at the same reputable, shopping establishment, you see a place that looks highly suspicious and has got the tinted windows and the neon signs and the pulled curtains and the oftentimes an unattended lobby that you can't see in, that is hidden by that once you walk in, there's doors that are hidden and cameras around and things like that. You just be attentive to it. You'd be surprised how often you will start to see them now.
Well, I'm going to share a little story. A few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was up in, and I don't mind saying the town, I was up in Brazelton, and I was at, a restaurant that also serves alcohol. And we were celebrating a birthday, a lady's birthday. And so there was a bunch of us ladies, we were there eating our meal. And we happened to be at a table that was right next to where, in a restaurant, how it has like a bar and people sit at the bar. And there was this gentleman, and the table was very close, and there was this gentleman sitting at the bar, and he had his phone out, and there was video on there, and it was a woman that was in the massage parlor. It wasn't showing anything of that, and we were having conversations, but you know how you just know you see that video right there, and it just kept distracting. And I called the owner of the bar over there, and I said, this gentleman over here, it appears that he is viewing stuff going on in a massage parlor. It didn't show any kind of sexual exploitation, but he was having conversation with a lady and you could hear them. And unfortunately, the manager just said, oh, that's so-and-so, he owns a bunch of these massage parlors. I said, well, I'm a paying customer and I really find this offensive right here. And he didn't do anything about it. Needless to say, I've never been back to that establishment. But I just couldn't believe that somebody would be that bold sitting in a restaurant at a bar or something. And you could see that. Yeah.
No, it's I don't know about that situation. I just know that obviously it is, there's this flourishes right now because there is a belief that somebody may get caught, but it won't be me. And it goes back to that, removing the cloak of anonymity. As soon as we can do some substantial and visible things, then this gets exponentially easier when anybody, but overwhelmingly it's men, when someone has to stop and think before they engage in a sex act like this. There's a 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 chance that this is going to destroy my life. Am I willing to do it? Right now, what they think is, really nobody gets caught, and certainly I won't.
Absolutely. Yeah, real quick, like with the pandemic, Camila, is I guess the massage parlors and things were shut down for a certain period of time, were they not?
Yes, no, they were. And that was, I think, I'm sure that was a great relief to a lot of people. And as things start to open back up, we need to take it on now. I mean, just from that, you learned that, hey, you can make it, things can change. And so we need to take advantage of that and really act now.
Okay, I just didn't know with those being closed down, if it, with other things were happening, moving someplace else, or phone calls, things that were intercepted, that it was something different.
And some of that is research, I think, that's still going on. But I know Bob actually has some more insight into other things that these same business owners own.
Well, and we're also in Georgia specifically. We're very fortunate. I mean, we have a Secretary of State, we have an Attorney General, we have a governor and a First Lady. We have a number of, candidly, probably all legislators care about it. We have a number of them that actually take action on it. And this is a cause that the executive branch in the state of Georgia doesn't just campaign on. They act on it, and they act on it the day after the campaign as they do the day before. That's pretty unique. And so we're very fortunate in Georgia. So what Camila mentioned earlier, and that is when you've got law enforcement and you've got legislators and you've got community groups and faith and educators in the academy and not-for-profits all working together, not overwhelmingly, there's always pockets of it, but not overwhelmingly concerned with who gets the credit, a lot of good can happen. And fortunately for the state of Georgia, we're in a place where we've got a lot of work to do, but we are making measurable progress.
Absolutely. Tell us what policy worked.
What? Sorry.
It was a question.
Oh, what policy work or what is Camila and her team working on right now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, for the illicit massage business, there's just several things that can be done. One of the most important ones, I think, is making sure both landlords and other tenants have the ability to, so if you are a tenant beside an illicit massage business and the landlord refuses to do anything about it, that you can get out of your lease. But also for a landlord, you are a landlord and you know this is an illicit massage business operating, that you can void that lease and get this person off of your property. But also making sure we've enabled code enforcement, the Georgia Massage Board, and they are fantastic. And the chair of the Georgia Massage Board is spent so much time helping us with this and helping draft the legislation that we need and that they need, so that they have investigators that can go in and just make sure they're complying with the laws. There's lots of little laws we can change that just make it safer, that you can see in, that you can't have a bunch of mattresses in the back where people are living, signs of trafficking, that everything, all services are, and their prices are readily available, that licensed massage therapists can give massages, and that we're closing loopholes so you can't do. I'm not a massage therapist. I am a Asian spa person, but I do the same thing. Asian spa is a common one. They try to get between the laws. And that's just a term. So we need to clean up all of those. We can really strengthen all those laws, but we also need to make sure that the investigators that go in to make sure people are complying with those can go in at any time. And I think that will be a huge change, because right now they actually have to give them warning before they go in. Just some basic laws that can make a huge difference. We know with, our restaurant inspectors, they don't give you a warning that we're coming tomorrow afternoon. To reiterate what Bob said, the Secretary of State and the governor's office, and of course the Attorney General's office that we've always worked with, have been so supportive of these changes and this legislation and the research that we've just finally finished. And so we're excited about things that are happening right now and changes that people are, making. It would be an understatement. We're very excited.
Hey, Camila, I mentioned just briefly the Debbie Vance Act.
Yeah.
And that was a big breakthrough for us this year.
Yeah. So, and this was legislation that just passed, got signed by the governor right before the deadline in July 1st. The Debbie Vance Act really provides ways for human trafficking survivors to clean up their records. So often when you're being trafficked, you end up with charges, whether it be prostitution, shoplifting, any number of things that while he has control of you, one of the other things he's going to have you do is take whatever charges, claim responsibility anytime you run into law enforcement for anything. Those drugs are on him, but you're going to say, oh, I hid them in his wallet. He didn't know they were there. So this happens a lot. And so we have these amazing survivors. They survive trafficking. They go through treatment programs. They get therapeutic help. They go through job training, but then they have trouble getting a job because they have arrest records and they have criminal records. So this was a vacatur and expungement law that really Georgia basically went from having nothing and no real means of vacating, and it really is bringing these women and men to true justice, setting things right. And so we are basically now the strongest state in the country with the laws that we were able to pass. One of the reasons this law has passed in Georgia and is so strong was because of the way it came about. We have a survivor advisory board at Street Grace, and that's been something very important to us, that we are not using survivors for their stories or to promote our own policies. We sat down with them almost 2 years ago and said, okay, you are the experts here. you're the ones with this lived expertise. What are the most important policies? Because sometimes policies, we think they sound great as policy people, but they don't really do anything, or they even have unintended consequences. So came up with a lot of brilliant ideas and policy changes, and really not marked this as their number one. And so it was these survivors, that marked it as their number one, that helped set it out. They were able to sit down with us, with the governor's office, with their chief staff, and say, these are the things that are most important that need to be in it. These are the things we need to do to be careful so it doesn't have unintended consequences. They were the ones that sat down with the first lady and proposed the idea in the first place. And so it's been amazing, but I really think one of the reasons it's been so successful is that we didn't come up with the policy idea and then ask a survivor to tell her story to get our own idea across, but that we listened to the experts and let them take the lead. And it's been super excited to see. And it's really been something, that the whole country has been looking at, because it's not something the movement's always done. And it's very important. And it really was. Additionally, one of the big draws for me when I came on board with Street Grace was this advisory board that was already in place, that we listened to. It wasn't just something in theory.
Well, that's great to hear that we've done that. So that kind of leads into my next question. Where's Georgia on public policy, and are we doing good? Are we doing great? Are we doing bad, good, indifferent? So that part is wonderful to hear.
Yes. And we are doing great. When I first started doing trafficking work in the Atlanta area, in Fulton County, we were pretty much a failing grade. Last year we were able to get an A for the first time. That was super exciting. And I know, Celeste, you've been in some of those classes when we've talked about it. And the big one for that was making sure we weren't basically re-traumatizing our survivors by treating them as the offenders. We were still sometimes, the Super Bowl last year was thankfully the last time a child was ever arrested for prostitution, but it was that recently. And we kept saying, we can't get them to pass the law. We tried so long to get them to pass the law, and it didn't get through until last year. And, First Lady Kemp really was a champion for it. And it was also, 10 years of, the community and the nonprofits educating the legislators about why this was so important. And, thankfully now our children are treated like the exploited and the survivors that they are, and they are not blamed for their own exploitation. So we're an A.
Yeah. So did the split session help, or did it not play a role?
There were a lot of things that didn't pass because of the split session. Thankfully, because so many people, so many legislators, and the Kemps really prioritized trafficking, a lot of our big stuff did get passed. So we were very excited about that. And when we still had to fight the hard battle, there was some legislation that they tried to get passed, which would have pretty much prevented any survivor from recovering from a hotel, even if they were really participating in allowing her exploitation, knowingly allowing her exploitation to happen. And that battle happened right before we went on break. So we almost didn't miss any breaks with the split session. We were just super grateful that our our legislation and the human trafficking legislation did not suffer, really because of the priority it's been given by the executive branch and, some amazing legislators that we're just so grateful to have worked with.
Well, that's great news to hear. And good that I live in a state who is taking this so seriously.
Yes, it's great. When we speak nationally, everyone's jealous of some of the things we've been able to do in the last few years.
Bob, any of the new policies that took effect this year that you'd like to share?
I think the one that for us, and when I say for us, I I don't mean necessarily for Street Grace, other than the fact that we worked with the Survivor Advisory Board. And therefore we know it was survivor thought, survivor written, survivor guided. And even, First Lady Kemp, as her office was coordinating and authoring some of this, engaged with the survivor community and had them come in by themselves and sit with them and say, is this the right wording? How would we do it? What are the unintended consequences of that? So I think what Camila just covered is probably the most significant one for us this year, the Debbie Vance Act. And Debbie Vance was one of the survivor board members from our Survivor Advisory Board that unfortunately died last year. And so this was a really neat tribute for her, and in and of itself was a bit of a healing process for the Survivor Advisory Board to be able to kind of rally around this. And I think this isn't a political statement. This is just a true statement. I think we are incredibly fortunate at any time, but especially in this day and age, to look at a state where the executive branch works together so well and accomplishes good. They are not perfect, and there's still more we want to do. But they're not divided and broken and arguing and distracted and buried underneath political, agendas and all that kind of stuff. We're really fortunate to work in a state where the executive branch and the leadership of the state really does have a sense of clarity and a sense of purpose, and they do a good job of staying the course. And so that's a lot of, there are lots of states around the country. Maybe every state around the country, there are people that want the same things we want. The difference is, and it goes back to that Camila's statement earlier about all of the different factions working together well. The difference is we have an opportunity here to work well with the state, with law enforcement, with the academy, and with the legislators. And at least on this and a few other things, we all wholeheartedly agree. Our job's not done here until this is gone. And so we just keep making progress. And in Georgia, we should be really proud of that. We got a lot of work to do. I didn't stick a flag in the ground that said victory. It's progress. It's progress on the journey, and we keep making progress. And progress sometimes is big steps. And the last year or two, we've made some big ones. Sometimes it's little steps. Sometimes it's just not giving up any ground. But we've been fortunate enough to make some really noticeable and measurable progress in the state.
You guys have done a phenomenal job with that too. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. We get to do it with a lot of really good people and a lot of really
Yes.
good organizations.
You do. You are surrounded by some amazing organizations as well as sponsorships, and you've involved the community. I know that a group of us attended your gala last year, and it was just amazing to see the people that have come together personally as well as on a corporate level.
Yeah.
You were talking about your technology earlier, right?
Yes.
The bot, is that the correct terminology?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a learning artificial intelligence. It's a chat bot.
And so it sounds like you've got it in quite a few places, and it's making some progress. And how is that impacting the fight against CSEC? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, you are. The commercial sexual exploitation of children. Yep.
Okay.
You said it very well. It goes specifically to that on our pillars. It goes to the third one, the pursuit. So the pursuit of the buyers of sex and the traffickers, by when someone sees an ad on the internet and one of these nefarious websites, and they say, that's what I think I want, and they dial the phone number or they send a text, they'll get a voice or they'll get a text response from somebody that appears to be the person that is pictured in the ad. They will go through and have a conversation. And look, when we started building these things, I thought these would be lengthy conversations where people would be building friendships and trying to establish rapport. It's not at all. I thought the average transaction would probably be 30 or 40 text exchanges, hey, how you doing? How's the weather? Nice to see you. Wondered this. It's not. It's, where are you? Are you available? What's it cost and what will you do? And in about 10 to 11 text exchanges, this thing's done. I mean, this transaction's done. So this is just a way to capture that information, to collect it. And then at the end of it, and I'm shortening and I'm leaving pieces of it out on purpose, but at the end of this, after this person on one end of the phone thinks that they've had a conversation with a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old, boy or girl, and they have this sense of, I'm getting what I want, and I've got this anxious anticipation, I can't wait kind of thing. They get a text that just says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that this entire conversation's been recorded and set up in a permanent file associated with your name and number. What you've just done is a felony in all 50 states, and you heard Camila talk about some of the penalties. And so there's this moment where that person, all they can do is stare at their phone, and I won't use the word that some of our partners that helped us designed it to do, but they just say, holy crap, that just happened. They can yell, they can fuss, they can scream, they can text back to Gracie. That's what we call our chatbot. They can text back to Gracie and they can scream and yell and cuss at her. She doesn't respond to them anymore. They just have to know they got that close. That close. If they just got caught that time, could they get caught the next time, and could it be law enforcement? And then in addition to that, we, through a different number, send out a link to a private website that provides lots of resources for help for people that are struggling with unresolved trauma, sexual addiction, sexual trauma, sexually deviant behavior, and some other things that often get coupled and wrapped up in this. And we have resources for all 50 states, and people can go to this private website that we connect them with. They can look at a resource, they can click out and make the first step to get resources or get connected. And interestingly enough, more than 20% of them are taking the first step to connect with a resource for help. So if we can stop it before, if you've acted out and you've committed a felony, there's some consequences that that are due to kind of settle things up there. But the vast majority of these people make 6 or 8 or 10 calls and attempts before they ever act out for the first time, because they're slowly sticking their toe in the water to see if they can get away with it. And if you can intercept a call and respond with that kind of a response early on as somebody, and there's some broad research that says about 90% of the people who are out there attempting to do this consider themselves hobbyists or exploring, and only 8 to 10% are kind of your hardcore users. And again, I don't want to stick a spear in the ground on that, because there may be other research somewhere, but that's a big enough number for us to know we've got a large pool of people there that if we can deter them from ever doing this again, and right now we're seeing in excess of a 30% reduction in repeat callers in the markets that we're in and things like that. So it's some really cool stuff taking place. And you know what? Because it's technology, it hasn't taken a sick day since the pandemic hit. And it runs 24/7, 365 days a year. Yeah. And it's becoming even more and more appealing.
That's awesome news. And I'm so thankful to hear that people have a chance to correct their ways.
Yes.
If they so desire.
If they haven't acted out, it is our strong interest to be able to stop them before they do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's really good news.
And that's good that you have a way that you can track a percentage that are actually reaching out to get the help. Bob?
Yeah. Honestly, Google Analytics, we didn't create it. We're just learning from it.
Very good. Very good. Well, as we round out the show here tonight, how have you all fared during this time, and how can our listeners help or get involved in Street Grace? And I want both of you all to speak on that, please.
No, wait, you want to go first, Camila, then?
I think that's a Bob.
Okay. No, I think there are a couple of different ways. And I'm so thrilled that we've been through the whole show and haven't talked about masks or social distancing. Just thank you so much for that. I think we're in a different kind of place right now. So unfortunately, our volunteer opportunities are down dramatically right now because there's not a lot of live stuff happening. Most things are happening online and virtually. And we have had some things that have occurred with some social and civic clubs and things like that, but volunteer opportunities are down rather dramatically. Having said that, everyone should go to streetgrace, streetgrace.org and sign up to get on the newsletter, because that will change and things will get back. And when they get back, they're going to be better than ever. Also, we have a virtual 5K that will be coming up in September. We've got our annual gala that will be coming up at the beginning of November. Those are going to be opportunities for people to get connected, to learn more. The trainings that Camila has done and the one that she's got tomorrow, where we're talking about how to affect policy, how to shape policy, how to make sure your voice isn't just heard because you've screamed the loudest, but it's heard because you're talking to the right people in the right way to get what you want. And this is a valuable training, even if your number one cause isn't, sex trafficking. This is learning how to affect policy, no matter where your passion is. But it's to do it in a meaningful way. And then I think, for us, obviously we're a not-for-profit. We don't get federal funding and things like that. All of our resources, every bit of work that we do comes because of the generosity of individual donors, corporations, foundations, and churches who get behind the cause and participate in it. So all of that information and everything you need is at streetgrace.org. And even though we may not have volunteer opportunities today, there's still ways to make your voice heard, and there's still things that you can get involved in. And if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get contacted from us once or twice a month, and it'll keep you current on everything that we do. And we would love to do it. We do trainings for businesses, for churches, for youth groups, for community groups. If you a corporation, our trainings are customized by whatever your industry and need is, and we'd just be thrilled and honored to be able to serve with you.
Very good, thank you. Camila.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I let Bob go first. I knew he could really help explain all that we're doing right now. One of the exciting parts I think about, because we are so we focused on redeeming technology, which means it's available when we need it now. To continue to reach out, to continue to do the trainings. We've been able to push out so many of the keeping kids safe in the digital age type trainings and materials and videos. So our social media is really an important thing, I think, to follow for so many, parents like myself, who all of a sudden have kids. And now it looks like for at least the next 9 or 10 weeks, going to be home and on technology all the time. So how can you protect them that way? We've put out a lot of trainings, some like this on more of a Zoom or Facebook Live type trainings that we've also, and they're in our resources page, which I linked to right there at the beginning.
Right.
But also, just short 3-minute videos, because we know how much, when you're going through a global trauma, one thing that really trauma affects attention span. So we've really been able to customize our trainings to really understandable videos that are important for parents to watch, and videos that are geared directly towards children and towards teenagers. And so that's one other great way people can get involved right now, and you can't be hands-on volunteering, is sharing some of these resources so that your friends and the other parents and your other classmates can learn how to protect themselves and keep themselves, safe from the exploiters, because they don't rest.
No.
For the last 5 years, almost all trafficking recruiting has happened online. So that didn't have to take a single pause during all this. So we have to be ready to address that.
Yeah, and I follow y'all on Instagram. I like Instagram. Not a Twitter person. Facebook just gets overwhelming, but I love Instagram. So yeah. I try to make good comments and like.
Yes. We
appreciate the people that make good comments.
Yeah, I'm all about good comments these days. I'm over the bad ones.
Yeah, that's right.
We all need that.
Hey, we're honored to have been able to be with you today, and thrilled and thankful for what you guys are doing. I'm gonna log on to Facebook and listen in. So I know you got Doc coming up next with SWAT League, and we've been fortunate enough to do a lot of stuff together, and I'm honored to be able to serve on the board for SWAT League. And I think you got a great second half of the show coming up, and we're excited to have been able to kick things off.
Well, thank you, Bob and Camila. We're very privileged and honored to serve with each of you in Street Grace. And we're excited to know that you do have intentions, and hopefully that the gala will go on in early November. And on behalf of Sara and I and the Women of Community Impact, I promise you we'll be right there to help volunteer and serve with you in that capacity. We've missed this year with Lobby Day and things that we didn't get to do with you this year. So we're looking forward to the last part of the year and serving with Street Grace. And what a fabulous show tonight. Demand an end because children are priceless. And our hearts just love your hearts and everything that you do, the passion and everything that you're doing to demand an end to the sex trafficking. Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, well, we thank you, and we are at the top of the hour, a little bit over here. And what I'd like to do is remind you that you're listening to the new WCEG network on WCEGtalkradio.com. You can watch us on your smart TV, YouTube, or WCEG network. I am Celeste Giordano, my co-host Sara Poe of Global Legacy and Wealth Building. And we're the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, where we speak life into the community. So we are excited for the second half of our show today. Sara, man, I'm gonna tell you, Bob and Camila are just amazing.
Oh, wow. It's amazing all the things they're doing. And I just don't think people realize how much they've got going on and how they're using the technology so well to prevent these children from being abused. And I just think it's awesome. And it's good to know that my state is doing a good job.
Absolutely. And Camila is just, besides their entire teams, just an amazing executive director for Street Grace and leading the way as well. Bob, I mean, their hearts are just servant heart leadership to demand an end to this. So we are definitely looking forward to hearing more about them and serving with them with the Women of Community Impact in November, and anything that we can do before that. And I do want to encourage our listeners to sign up for the online event they have tomorrow. We have personally been in person to training. We've done some online training with them, and this is an organization that you can make a difference in your community. So we are at the second half of the hour, Sara. And before we get started and I introduce our next guest speaker, would you do me a favor, Sara, and tell us the name of your company? I forgot to do that in the beginning, so I'm going to do that now. Tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Well, hi, I'm Sara Poe. I'm with Poe's Accounting Services. We made it through last Wednesday, the extended tax deadline. It was a crazy, crazy tax season. But if you file that extension, it'll be here before you know it. So don't wait to the last minute. There's so many things out there to help people now, especially companies who are having to lay people off or their income's just down. There's so many things that the government has put in place, different counties have put in place for nonprofits, especially. We're in Gwinnett County, and the county actually has a grant for nonprofits. If you're located in Gwinnett County, it's worth looking into. Every little bit helps, because I don't have statistics, but I can only imagine that your donations are down. And in a case like Street Grace, they use every dollar wisely, and sometimes you need help getting more dollars. So there's those programs out there. So any nonprofits that would love to learn about that or just need a little bit of help, I'd hope you give us a call at Poe's Accounting Service. Our website is posecpas.com, or give us a call at the office, 770-545-8841, because I'd love you all to succeed.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. And I am Celeste Giordano. I'm a master sales strategist and a business mentor. I help business entrepreneurs, direct sales teams, and corporations exponentially increase sales and profit through lead generation, building relationships, and accountability. I can be reached at celeste@celestegiordano.com or 1-888-692-6170. Okay, Sarah, I'm excited for our next guest. We have Dr. Jim Houston. Jim, are you with us here today?
I'm here.
Very good. We're glad to have you, sir. And Dr. Jim Houston, known as Doc, has led humanitarian aid efforts in more than 150 countries. He is the co-founder, along with Ray Lewis, and president of SWAT League. Now, SWAT League stands for Sports World Against Trafficking. Their mission is to maximize the professional and college sport industry to make an impact in middle schools, high schools, and entire communities with the goal of eradicating human trafficking, specifically in North America. Human trafficking is the fastest growing and most profitable crime in the world. The FBI estimates there are more than 100,000 girls aged 9 to 19 being trafficked in the United States. The average target age for girls is 13 and 12 for boys. An estimate 1% of victims are able to escape this life. Human trafficking impacts every race, every social demographic. Based on our research and experience, we believe conservatively there is at least one person being victimized or exploited in 95% of the middle schools and high schools in the United States. And the good news is SWAT League has a plan. And SWAT League plan uses a 4-step model as follows: enlighten, educate, engage, empower, and it will equal eradicate. Doc challenges students to know that they can make the most impact towards the eradication of human trafficking than any other demographic. And Doc believes that students have the ability to reduce the future supply of victims and completely eliminate the future demand for trafficking. I know that was long, but I wanted to read every bit of that, Doc. Welcome. We're glad, Sarah and I are so glad to have you on the air with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to listen to Bob. That's the first time I've heard Camila speak at length. I've met her and I've heard her speak, but that was the first time I've really heard, that much from her. But yeah, Bob's just a great guy. Just really one of the people that's in this fight against human trafficking for the right reasons.
Well, absolutely. And we were so blessed with our relationship and the camaraderie and the relationship that we have with Bob Rodgers and Street Grace, that he referred you to us tonight on our show. So we, Sarah and I, are really excited to hear about you and your story and the SWAT League. So the first thing I'd like to do is ask you, please tell us, what is SWAT League and what is your mission?
All right. Well, of course, you said a little bit of it in my bio there that had information, but SWAT League is the Sports World Against Trafficking. Kind of, I guess, to tell you about the mission, I'll take you back just a little ways to tell you how I got involved in this. As the bio stated, I've had a lot of experience in running nonprofit organization, doing humanitarian work, literally all over the world. That God has just blessed a lot of the things that we've been a part of, and we've had tons of volunteers. I'm in no way taking credit for any of it, but we just had a lot of impact that's been made, specifically with children and families and such. And to be honest, when I first, my first involvement, I guess, in the human trafficking issue was a global involvement where we had provided some clean water to some safe homes in India and South Sudan and Haiti, where they had rescued children from human trafficking. And I really didn't know much about it. If you had asked me about human trafficking, especially of children, my thoughts would have gone to those other countries, which obviously it is a horrible thing that happens there. But I was very ignorant to how rampant human trafficking is here in the United States. And but that was kind of my involvement. It was providing those safe homes with clean water. And through just a random breakfast I was having with a former NFL player and a guy who's a Grammy Award-winning Christian music artist, a guy named Mac Powell. The football player was Sean Alexander that played for the Seattle Seahawks. And we were just having breakfast. And I was telling them about what I just told you about the clean water in those countries. And they ended up connecting me with a mutual friend of theirs, said, if you want to get more involved, this person can help. And I went and met with her and her husband. And, she informed me about the rampancy of human trafficking in the U.S. She left me a few copies of her book. I left the meeting not really knowing what obviously it hit me personally, having children myself. But I really didn't know what my involvement would be. It's not like I was just, looking for something else to do. I had plenty going on. And, it was one of those things where, we feel like if you have the ability, when you see something wrong and you have the ability where you think you have the ability, and especially a calling to do something about it, then you kind of have the responsibility to do that. And I just felt like I was being led by God to kind of put some of the things we were doing on hold. I didn't know how long. I had some people that could kind of run the things we had established over the last several years, and really just felt like I was being led to put something together. And I guess this kind of gets into your question about our mission. I noticed I wanted to learn. I love to research. I'm not the kind of person that sits down to read a fictional story, but I love to research and study and learn facts. And I started learning about human trafficking, how it works, talking to people that were involved in this fight. That's one of the ways I got to meet and know Bob, and really just kind of learning what organizations were doing, because what I felt led to do was something unique in that I didn't want to come out and just jump on a bandwagon issue that people were starting to do things about and was getting more attention. I really wanted to do something that could be an assistance to organizations like Street Grace and some of these other organizations around the country that were doing the legwork and doing the groundwork in these communities. And so I guess the best analogy I can give you is we're kind of established and set up kind of like a United Way, but specific to the issue of human trafficking. And what I mean by that is we have 5 what we call our main collaborative organizations. Street Grace is one of them. We also have Operation Underground Railroad, Strike Out Slavery, Free International, and the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking. And the reason we picked those 5 is because all 5 of those organizations are working in the fight against human trafficking, but they are also tied to or connected to the sports industry in some way. And due to my background, I've got a lot of connections in the sports industry as well. And I went and pitched this concept to Ray Lewis, former Baltimore Raven, Super Bowl MVP, arguably best linebacker to ever play professional football. And I had been able to connect with him through just a very unique set of circumstances that I can't explain other than God. But I went and met with him at his house in Baltimore. I shared this vision with him. He said he wanted to be a part of it. And I literally spent the next year going around and meeting with survivors, meeting with organizational leaders, learning what their successes were, what are their challenges, what would take them to the next level. Because it's not just those 5 collaborative organizations, but we also have a goal to help support local organizations all across the country who are working in the element of human trafficking. So that's kind of the goal. The mission is as you stated in the bio, it's to utilize the influence and the resources of the sports industry to make that happen. So long answer to a short question.
That was a good answer. That was a good answer, sir.
And I would think, especially in middle school and high school, that you get the attention of some of these kids who could be potential victims with the sports, right? You get a segment of these kids who may not otherwise pay attention.
Absolutely. And not only that, and I guess this is kind of one of the things that is really unique about our strategy, because we're not just about, it's not just supporting these local organizations. We have a few initiatives of our own that we're doing mostly from a media and a promotional awareness, the future demand. And that, I think, is what really separates us from a lot of the other things out there, makes us unique, is utilizing the influence of these sports leaders and celebrities. There's a lot of debate out there on how it's hard to measure a crime that we only know what we know, right? I mean, we only know the arrests that are made, and it's, a lot of people refer to it as a crime hidden in plain sight. There's so much more going on that would probably just leave us, in shock if we really knew the real facts. And it's really an estimate based on what we know. And there's a lot of people that debate, how, what the target age is and exactly how rampant it is. But one thing that I felt, as I mentioned, learning and studying early on, I believe you have to attack a problem at its source. And the problem at its source for human trafficking is the demand. Now, Bob talked about Gracie, their bot, that's attacking what we would call the current or present demand by intercepting current transactions that are coming across the wire where somebody's trying to solicit sex from a minor. What we're doing is kind of complementing that and trying to attack the future potential demand. Because the one statistic that I feel extremely confident about, no matter what all the other ones are, is that 100% of the future potential demand is sitting in our schools. Those are the young boys who might one day be a buyer and fuel the demand. And it's of my opinion that if we wait until they become a buyer, or wait until they're hooked on something that develops into more and they become a buyer, then we've waited too long. We've got to attack this before they get to that point. And these sports heroes and sports legends and celebrities and whatnot and coaches and all, they have a very unique platform that they can come in, especially to the boys, as a man's man, somebody that's looked up as a hero, and teach you this is not the right way to treat someone. But mainly, one of the other things I learned as I started meeting survivors over that first year I mentioned, going around and meeting with survivors and all, I probably met, and this is an estimate, probably about 200 survivors. And of those survivors, and I know there's exceptions, but I would ask the question, and some of them you would go in groups, and, in some states they can only house survivors who are over the age of 18. But I would ask the question, how many of your survivors were first brought into trafficking before they turned 18? And I kid you not, the answer to that of the ones that I met is 100%. I did not meet one. I have yet to, and like I said, I'm sure there's an exception, but I've yet to meet a survivor who didn't get brought into trafficking until after they turned 18. Every single one of them was before they turned 18, and that's a crime. That's rape. And so I don't care, in my belief, if a person purchases a who they consider a prostitute, and Bob even talked about the transaction. I don't know what the word would be, transactionalness, if that's a word, of these deals that they deal with on Gracie, about how it's in 10 texts that they're ready to go. It's very transactional. That's because they don't view this as rape. They view it as a transaction. And that's the disconnect, because most men would not consider themselves the kind of guy that would rape a woman. Obviously, there are people that do that. Most men don't consider themselves that kind of person, but they don't consider this rape. They consider it she was willing, or in some cases he was willing, because there's some really sick people out there, because I paid. And so that's why they did it. And so it's about a transaction to them. And so what we're trying to educate with these sports legends in the schools is that even if you purchase somebody that's 24, if they were brought into this life at 15, you were an accessory to rape, because they were brought into that life as a minor, and they haven't been able to get out of it because they were brought in as a minor. And so we want people to understand, we want the young men to understand that if they participate in this later in life, when they get to that point and they get to that point of thinking, I'm going to click that button and I'm going to purchase this person, they're going to do it under our watch and under their conscience of knowing that they're participating in rape. And so our goal is to use these sports legends to educate young men, especially, that's the fact that they're participating. If they do this, they're going to do it knowing that they're an accessory to rape. And yes, we are obviously, like you said, we have that voice to help limit the supply by teaching kids how not to get lured into it. But I think what really sets us apart is being able to attack the future potential demand.
And that's not even something I thought about, because when I think of kids, I think of them as victims. I don't think of them as a future person who would go into that transaction with somebody. And that goes to show that people, just normal everyday people, how we live in a bubble and don't necessarily understand all of that also. That's just sad that, that we have to educate them now not to do that.
Well, and one thing that I'd like to add to it, Doc, and to Sarah, I know how old Sarah is. We grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. And, we grew up where you had both, your mom and dad living at home. You sat down at the dinner table at 5. Sex wasn't things like that were just not a topic of discussion. And, and over the years, you have a high divorce rate, and we have all kinds of things going on in the world. And the younger generations are exposed to single parents or single parents that they have people, partners living with them and stuff like that. We didn't grow up in that era. So you can imagine, what goes on in the mindset of a middle school and a high school and the things that they're exposed to at an early age. And where's their mentorship and leadership coming from?
Yeah, exactly. And there's got to be some kind of male role models, especially in the eyes of those young men, to have a positive example to look up to, because unfortunately, media, and I'm not talking about like news media, I'm talking about, movies and television and such. They give a depiction of things that unfortunately creates a false, view of what relationships between a man and a woman should be. And it takes was it Edmund Burke, I think, that made the statement, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. And, we believe in everybody that all the athletes that we've got on board with us, especially the male athletes, we hold them to that, and that, we let them know what this fight is about. And, it's not about just, an endorsement of something good, but it's about taking a stand about what's right and what's not right. And, it's also an issue that, as you mentioned in the bio, it impacts every race and every social demographic. So, if you also, another reason, I guess, for going to the sports part of it, and by the way, the sports industry, unfortunately, has a very, it's hard to, I don't know if you want to call it a direct role. I would say an indirect role with regards to human trafficking, because the traffickers take advantage of events that bring, people into cities, into hotels, and fill those hotels, because it's like increased potential clients. And so it's not, I'm in no way saying it's a football game or whatever that causes trafficking, but anything, it could be a preacher's conference, anything that brings people into a city, fill up hotels, does that. But sporting events happen on a regular basis. They're scheduled way ahead of time. And your main demographic, as you're talking about, there's a lot of men who come who are in the mindset of being entertained. And so that fuels the demand in those cities. And, they can watch the rise of demand in cities when there's, a lot of people hear about it around the Super Bowl, but it doesn't have to be a big game like the Super Bowl. It could be, a college football game or whatever, anything that brings people into a city. So, as we've approached the sports industry, it's been a lot of, we know they don't want us coming out and saying, hey, your games are causing trafficking, because that's not, there's nothing sinister about a football game, obviously, or a baseball game or a basketball game or a hockey game, but we do want them to understand that it is happening. And what we're asking them to do is just be proactive and show that they care about families and care about children by endorsing education and technology and media that can help provide awareness and prevent it. So we've kind of approached them with that angle in it. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying about the diversity of the race and demographics and everybody that it does that. If you think about our society, the one time that you see people of different race, different social demographic, where it's not even an issue, people don't even look, people don't know who's sitting next to them in the stands. If what their job is, they could be a multimillionaire, or they could be, they could work at McDonald's. I mean, you never know, but you're sitting next to somebody, and if your team scores, you see people high-fiving in the crowd and celebrating. And there's just a sense of unity because there's a common cause, that common cause being a sports team that they want to do well, want to win. And so sports has a very unique way of bringing people together. And with all of the, stuff going on in our country right now and all the division, this is an issue that we believe that we can try to transcend that from the sports industry and utilizing their influence of unity and attacking a common cause that impacts every racial demographic, every social demographic, children, and we believe it's a unifying cause to good people that want to take a stand and make an impact for something that needs to be done.
Doc, we have a question from a listener, and they want to know, has the pandemic had an impact on trafficking? Is it slowing down or still moving right along?
It's one of those things where I mentioned earlier, it's hard to say with statistics. You don't really know. You only know what you know. I will tell you this: it's slowed down. It has unfortunately slowed down our efforts, but we were in a stage where we were actually going to do our official public launch as an organization, like in about, I think, 3 days from today. July 24th was supposed to be our major launch. We had a major meeting we had scheduled at the White House with some executives from the sports industry that was going to take place first. And then we had a launch event that was scheduled for July 24th. And unfortunately, it's put a delay on that. Now, we've had some things we're doing, some technology. We've got a technology company that's been working behind the scenes and developed some stuff we're going to have launched out in the schools in the fall. But it has, kind of put a slowdown on some of the things we wanted to do that we had planned to get out and educate. As far as the actual happening, we know it's still happening. We know people are getting rescued, at our borders and a southern border, especially domestically. We've myself and Ray and a couple of the athletes, we took a trip down to the southern border and met with the U.S. Border Patrol and ICE down there, and got to tour some of the stuff that goes on with human trafficking that regards to coming across the borders. And one of the things that I really didn't understand and didn't know it was this prevalent, but of the people who cross the southern border illegally, about 30% of the supposed families are fraudulent families, meaning they're not legitimate families. And now that doesn't always mean trafficking, but when somebody does something illegal, especially smuggling children across, there's a reason for it. And so our Border Patrol, they're doing a fabulous job, despite what a lot of the narratives out there say of really caring for kids and working with faith-based organizations specifically near the border. It's really, one of the things that really struck me was when we were there, we were looking at this monument in New Mexico, and you could, by one turning of the head, you could look at a very crime-infested area of Mexico where drugs were rampant and all that, and you could just pivot your head about 45 degrees onto the U.S. side and literally look at 2 elementary schools and just see how close those were to the border. So, I know they're still doing a lot from that perspective. I know it has slowed down some of the organizations that are doing a lot of educational stuff because of the school situation. Schools are right now trying to focus on, just getting back. And I think, I will say this, I think traffickers are prepped to, if they're not already, taking advantage of the focus on human trafficking kind of being swayed away from that, because there were a lot of people that, there was a lot of traction being, coming from the movement, the human trafficking movement, where people were learning more about trafficking. And when this pandemic hit, it kind of shifted the focus away from that. And I'm not saying what we're focused on now is not, obviously it's something we need to be focused on, but it's just reality. But it has shifted that focus to other things, and you can't let go. There's other things that are still important that we need to stay focused on, or they will take advantage of it if they're not already. I'm sorry, I really couldn't answer the question exactly, because I don't know. I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know it's still happening, and I know that traffickers are waiting with bated breath to be able to just pounce on, the sporting events to start back up, for example, that I just mentioned, to be able to take advantage of those people coming back in. And also, you can probably imagine that those buyers who were people who were already buyers that haven't been able to get their fix for so long are just, waiting to be able to do that again. So if it hasn't ramped back up, there will probably be a big spike right when we can go back to life as normal, whenever that may be.
Well, I'd probably say it's a good thing that sporting events are on hold as far as sex trafficking is concerned.
Well, I think if we can do the things that we're putting together, I think we can turn that into a positive, because we have, and I'll give you one example. One of the collaborating organizations I mentioned, Strike Out Slavery, that's run by Albert Pujols and his wife Deidre Pujols. Now, Albert Pujols, if you're not aware, I think he's now the 5th leading home run hitter in the history of Major League Baseball. He's still playing. His wife Deidre runs that organization, Strike Out Slavery. They do live events at Major League Baseball games to provide awareness. They'll bring in survivors. They'll have a survivor maybe sing the national anthem before the game, somebody throw out the first pitch, and between innings. Of course, baseball is a little slower than some other sports, so there's some time between innings where they can make announcements, and they'll bring people to the pavilion where they'll have displays up, and a lot of different things that they're doing. We're kind of partnering with them by bringing in. One of the things we'll be doing is bringing in some of our partnering organizations to train the emergency personnel at arenas and security personnel at arenas on how to recognize trafficking, and even how to hold a situation where trafficking may be suspected until law enforcement can do further investigation.
That's amazing, because that's a whole nother way to help some of these children, or to get these kids out of that situation. For those events for those leaders or those ushers or whatever, be able to recognize those signs. That's what we all need to learn, is to recognize those signs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, for me, that one of the things that I've kind of set as a goal with our school assemblies, and I think we've had some success, is making the way it's presented very personal. Everybody, I think most people have heard the term human trafficking by now. And I think most people probably know enough to know it's bad, but that doesn't mean they really have a clue what it has to do with them. So there's a lot of ambiguity there. And so that's what we want to remove that. We want people to understand that, this could be somebody you care about. This could be, this could be you, it could be your sister, it could be your niece, it could be a friend. It could be somebody, and there could be somebody, who is a buyer. Unfortunately, I met the lady that I met that got me educated on domestic trafficking. She told me the first buyer, she said, "Do you want to know what a buyer looks like?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "The first buyer that I met was a man I had known for 12 years whose family attended our church." Somebody you would least expect, to be someone who would be, addicted to that, or brought into that, to that. And unfortunately, it happens. It's, we hear about the Jeffrey Epsteins and all the billionaires and people that are doing this high dollar stuff, but it's not just them. It's going on. Not only are the victims every race and every social demographic, but so are the buyers. They come from all over, and they, it's an addiction that they believe they have to, to feed. And so they do. And again, we hope we can approach them before. And I'll tell you, in saying that, one of the things that kind of going back to talking about that future potential demand as relative to this, what kind of brought that to my attention was in the story from that particular buyer. One of the things the lady told me was, when he first got caught, and obviously there's a lot of shame, and he's having to focus on hopefully working his marriage out and all this. But one of the things he said that really kind of got my attention, and he said, and I'll say it kind of as he did. He said, "In my mind, my sin or my transgression for the first several months was adultery. And obviously that is, horrible. That is a bad thing. And that, and he's having to live with, that every day and, answer questions and all that kind of stuff every day. And I get that. But the point was, it took him a few months before he realized that he was basically raping those victims. And it didn't dawn on him until later. And that's why we believe it's so important to educate people, especially the young boys, before they get to that point, that it is rape and they are participating in rape if they're doing this, and that's why we believe it's important to attack the problem before it's a problem. The old saying, was it a half an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that's what we're trying to do, is attack the problem before it's a problem.
Well, Doc, and something that you just said, with the pandemic and everything, it's really sad that the schools and churches are shut down, because oftentimes the schools and churches were a safe haven, and education was there as well. And what havens are available for the victims now?
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest, if you can imagine yourself in the shoes of a survivor. I mean, first of all, if you've ever, met anybody who's been raped or sexually abused, their self-confidence most of the time is completely shot. But also, it's not just that. There is a huge issue with trust. There are, just like there's, and I'm in no way bashing police. Obviously, I'm a huge supporter of our law enforcement, and we see things about the random few that do things off, but have been law enforcement that have participated in this. Very small, obviously, numbers, but there are preachers that have participated in buying and human trafficking, and it could be anybody and has been anybody. There's no job category that you could say that person could not be a buyer. And so trust is extremely, and there are females who are traffickers. So it's not just men who are using the girls. So there are female, basically, pimps. And so, trust is a huge, huge issue. And if you think about it, if you were a survivor, if you were a victim, and you wanted to come forward, your number one, I guess, goal or desire would be that whoever you told would believe you. And, they have to be extremely cautious. And that's why, and that's one of the reasons it's so hard for somebody to get out, is they don't know who or where to go. And, yes, churches should be safe havens, and that's why you want to make sure if a church has a program where they're fighting this, it does not ever need to be a single person. I don't mean a single person like somebody not married, but I mean, it doesn't need to be one person. It needs to be at least two or more people who are a part of the counseling or the team that somebody would be able to come to. There can't be any exception to that. You're not going to get unless that person is in fear for their life at that moment, they're probably not going to come forward to just one single individual. They're going to want to come to a couple, because there's kind of safety in numbers, I guess. But that's another reason it's important, as we do, assemblies, and we provide education to make people aware of where they can go and who they can go, and the ways to come forward. There's a very specific set of things you would want to tell somebody, that if they are being victimized, and a lot of, and sadly, some of the trafficking is what they call familial trafficking. They're actually being trafficked by family members. And so, I mean, imagine how, you would think if you could trust anybody, it would be your family, right? But that's unfortunately not always the case. Yeah, we've got to do a really good job at educating. And again, you don't know who these people are. I mean, you're having to educate. That's why you have to educate all the kids and everybody, because it's not like you can go, okay, we're going to go educate a bunch of victims on how to come out. If we already knew they were victims, they wouldn't have to come out. So we're having to educate everybody. And hopefully the victim hears it and gets the message and listens, and that, you know, they feel comfortable coming forward to whoever in a school or a church or wherever that they can come forward.
Wow. So who are some of the athletes that are part of your SWAT league?
Well, so we started out, as I mentioned, you know, Ray Lewis was the first person that I went to. I had some connections with a few athletes, and I'll just kind of tell you quickly how that happened, because it's a really cool story. Through some of my previous humanitarian work, I had a connection with a lady who had been a part of that lived in Baltimore. I had no connection to Ray Lewis, but I knew for some of the things we were wanting to do, I needed an athlete who was kind of passionate, but also intense. And so Ray Lewis was the first person to come to mind. And I knew he was involved in some really good stuff, and loved to help people. And also obviously very intense linebacker. And so I had no way to get to him. And I called this lady in Baltimore, and I said, have you got any connection to Ray Lewis? And she said, may know one person, give me a week. Well, she called me back like within 2 hours and said, I've got a guy on the phone who knows Ray, that's worked with him on some stuff, and he's on the line. So I told this guy, and he said, all right, give me a day or two, and let me see if I can get a hold of Ray. And I think he would want to be a part of this. I've heard him mention human trafficking before. Well, that guy calls me back. He actually texted me back that evening and said, do you have time to get on a phone call with Ray tomorrow? So it was literally within 24 hours of having this thought, I want to get in touch with Ray Lewis. I was on a 45-minute phone call with him, and a week later, I was at his house in Baltimore, sitting with him in his living room, kind of sharing this vision with him. So it was really just a confirmation that this is the direction I needed to go. So Ray has jumped on board, and kind of to tell you our strategy, as we've begun to approach sports leagues and teams to get their involvement ultimately as a team and all, our strategy was, well, let's go get some key individuals that we have connections to that would be willing to be a part of this and help us take this to their leagues. And so, from the NFL, we've got Kurt Warner, Sean Alexander, Ray Lewis, obviously. From pro wrestling, Sting, Ted DiBiase, Lex Luger. From baseball, Albert Pujols, who I mentioned, his wife Deirdre, John Smoltz, also Chris Hammond, who was a pitcher for several teams, Adam LaRoche, who was a big part of the Free Internationals organization already. From the NBA, Kyle Korver, who's an NBA player. We also have Terry Cummings, former All-Star, who's actually a pastor in Atlanta now. Street Grace, who Ernie Johnson, who's one of their hosts on the NBA on TNT, he and his wife were actually the founders of Street Grace with the organization you talked to earlier with Bob. And then from boxing, Deontay Wilder, the former heavyweight champion, has done some endorsements and a part of it. And hockey, we've got Marty Turco and a couple of others from professional hockey. And then from college sports, we've got Coach Nick Saban, Bobby Bowden, Dabo Sweeney, some major names in coaching. Obviously, Bobby Bowden being a legend, the others still coaching. And from NASCAR, we've got Ward Burton, and actually the president of NASCAR is going to be getting involved with some of the stuff we're doing in DC. So really just, that's just a short list. I'm literally trying to think off the top of my head of people that are already involved. But what our plan is, that first meeting that we were going to have in DC was with some executives from each of the sports leagues to kind of get their buy-in to take this to each team, and then once we filter down to the teams, then we'll be able to go and do things in these communities. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward with that very soon, having that first meeting and then start planning the launch. We're just praying that the COVID pandemic will obviously, for not just this reason, but for other reasons, obvious reasons, we hope that this pandemic will go away soon.
That's awesome, Doc. I mean, it's amazing. Almost every angle of every sports team that you have been able to build relationships and have camaraderie with to get people involved to demand an end to the sex trafficking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where if they give you the time to share what you're doing, most want to help, and so it's just a point of getting their ear. And the good thing is when you got somebody like Ray Lewis and some of these people, I mean, they know people. We don't want to go overboard and have 100 individuals from the start. We wanted to get a couple from each sport, and then get the teams, and then build on that with people who want to do more with the cause and all. And we also have another thing it's really a big deal is we have the National Federation of High School Athletics already on board, which is huge. And we've got
That's huge.
the National Association of School Resource Officers. So those are what I call access points. Those get us from point A of the athletes to point B into the schools in front of the students. And so it's really good to have those people who are involved and want to help the kids, from more than just an educational and learning math and English and science and whatnot, but also learning some important things they need to know themselves. And if they have children one day, they're going to want to protect their children. So we just want to do all we can to get that education out there in a way that's relatable.
Absolutely. Well, and closing down this hour here, Doc, what can people listening to tonight, what can they do to be involved with SWAT League?
A couple of things. I would say keep an eye on our website, which is www.swatleague.org. SWAT, just like a SWAT team, SWAT. We didn't want to call, of course, there's already a SWAT team, but the reason we went with league is because we're kind of bringing all these leagues together and teams together. So we ended up going with SWAT League, but it's www.swatleague.org. And we actually have, I mentioned it earlier, and I can't really give too much in detail yet, but it won't be long. We've got our we've done 2 demos. The first one was to show us, and the second one was various national law enforcement, from everybody from Border Patrol to DOJ to ICE that was involved. But we had this concept to develop a technology that's unique because it's a preventative technology. And basically, it will be a free way for parents to take a step to help prevent instances of trafficking from occurring. And so it's hard to say much more than that, but because we don't want word of it getting out before it actually gets out. But it will be promoted through athletes, through their social media, through the teams and leagues, but also directly through the schools and the parents. And we hope to have everything ready by sometime before the end of this first semester of school, hopefully September, October. Hope to have everything ready to go. It's close. We really just have to develop, the technology's ready. We had a company that basically did this for free because of the cause for us when we shared the concept with them. And they developed this for us. But really the holdup is we've got to develop our materials to kind of accompany it, which involves how to use it and what it's for. And so we've got to put some videos together with some of these athletes to kind of promote it, and then also to explain it so that on the website it's kind of a how-to video. This is how you sign up. This is what it's for. This is what you do. And once we get all that ready, then we'll blast that out to schools. But you can keep an eye on our website for that. And then obviously, like Bob said with Street Grace, we are a nonprofit, and we're kind of in those early stages where we haven't gone out and done fundraisers and anything like that yet. We feel like we'll have an opportunity to raise a lot of funds that we can disperse through all these organizations. But if somebody has heard what we've talked about and wants to support our organization, you can donate through PayPal online. We are a nonprofit, and all of that, everything that's donated is going to go into helping us with the promotional materials and all the stuff we're putting together for this technology that we feel like. And I'll just say this is kind of so that it's supporting good. I mentioned I talked to over 200 survivors, or around 200 survivors. I would estimate about 70% of the survivors that I've shared this with, this concept of this technology, have told me directly that if they had had access to this, they either would have been able to get out much quicker, and some of them said that they would probably have never been trafficked had this been available to them before their trafficking had taken place. Now, it's one thing to say it's there; it's another thing to get it in the hands of the people that may be a victim. So there's, that's part of the strategy. We've got to get it out there to every family, every foster care organization, and all, so that they can be protected. But it's going to make a huge impact, we believe, in this fight. And anything that's donated at this point is helping us get off the ground, get off, with our launch and all, to be able to start bringing in resources and doing more with the sports industry to help hopefully eradicate this horrible reality that is, you want to talk about a pandemic. I mean, this is this is one that was going on before this coronavirus. That's if coronavirus goes away today, we've still got this that we need to do something about.
Well, we just appreciate you coming on the air tonight, Doc, and sharing with us about the SWAT League. Sara and I are the co-founders of the Women of Community Impact, and we have supported sex trafficking and street grace and many other organizations. And we look forward to having a conversation with you and building this relationship where we can help support you as well with the SWAT League. It's an amazing organization, and you're doing amazing work in the communities across the United States.
Well, we appreciate it. I love the opportunity to be able to share, what we're doing. Like, again, I know we're kind of early on. It's been kind of what was supposed to be a 2-year pre-launch is turning into what looks like maybe a 3-year pre-launch because of the pandemic. But hopefully, like I said, with this technology, we'll be able to get that out there even before we officially launch to the public as an organization, I think, which is kind of unique. But because of the connections we've been able to make with the sports industry and national school organizations, I think we can get this out there quickly and go ahead and start making an impact with that. And probably will just, help the launch be even bigger when we're able to get to that point.
Absolutely. God's just got a bigger plan and a bigger launch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to tell you, thank you. Sports are very near and dear to my heart. I got 3 grandkids and they all play, and I love watching them and being a part of that. And I grew up with football and basketball and all those wonderful things. And I've missed it. This is the first time I ever watched the draft, the NFL draft, but it was sports, But I just want to tell you, thank you for everything you're doing and how much we appreciate that and hope to build on this relationship.
Thank you guys very much.
Absolutely, Doc. Sara, it's been a pleasure hosting this show tonight. It's amazing. Every time we bring Bob Rodgers and Camila with Street Grace, and now an introduction into Doc with SWAT League, we expand our vision and our knowledge on the sex trafficking world and what's going on a day-to-day basis. And now we're getting into middle school and high school and how, we can help stop that.
Yes, absolutely.
On that. I'd also like to say thank you to Penny Rodgers, our founder of WCEG Network, and gives us this amazing platform to get these amazing nonprofit organizations out there to our community. We are the first and third Tuesday of each month. The first Tuesday is always going to be a show about for-profit. The third Tuesday is always going to be about nonprofit. Sara and I are the co-founders of the Women of Community Impact, which is a 501c3, and we are very active, involved in our communities. Also, we have this month for the Women of Community Impact, we are supporting Gwinnett Children's Shelter Home of Hope for the children back to school. Even though they are having online school, they still need school supplies. So we have 17 children over there at Home of Hope that we are going to be donating the school supplies that they need to get a great education this month. So with that being said, Sara, any other thing you'd like to say to close us out?
No, it's been a great evening.
Absolutely. Doc, we can't thank you enough, and we look forward to carrying on our conversation with you.
Awesome. So that sounds great. And definitely keep me in touch with what you guys are doing. And I'll let you know when the technology is ready to send out, and you guys can go on the website and look at it. And I think you'll really appreciate it when you see it. It's a really neat concept.
Absolutely. We sure will. All right. Let's have a good evening. Have a blessed evening. Stay healthy and stay safe.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Penny.
Hi, Penny.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Thank you. We appreciate you, Penny.
Great show. I appreciate you all. Thanks.